Good afternoon in New York and North America's East Coast. Good morning, America's West Coast. Good evening in Paris, London, Amsterdam, Europe, Ukraine, and welcome whatever time of day or night for all who are joining us from all corners of the world. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for MultiGenerational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining our webinar, Reparative Justice I, Challenges in Engaging, Interviewing, and Supporting Victims, Survivors, Witnesses of Torture. Held on the International Day of Supporting Victims of Torture, today's webinar focuses specifically on international attempts at protecting and healing both torture victim survivors and professionals and others working with or for them from potential re-traumatization, from sharing the lifelong and intergenerational legacies of their traumatic experiences. Continuing the International Center for MultiGenerational Legacies of Trauma webinar series on reparative justice, today's webinar follows 4 webinars we conducted in collaboration with Yellow Flowers Foundation, Reparative Justice I, a conceptual introduction to reparative justice. 2, key groups of traumatized victims. 3, difficulties in listening and hearing traumatized victims, survivors, witnesses. And 4, challenges in engaging, interviewing, and supporting child victims of war and terror, all answering the call for specialized training in reparative justice for professionals and others working with them. Indeed, participants were urged to view the 4 earlier webinars of this series prior to attending this one. This webinar would not have happened without the dedication of ICMGLT's board member, Dr. Mary Fabry, and ICMGLT Advisory Council member and chair of its Ukraine Working Group, Dr. Irina Frankova. As always, we acknowledge with warmth our beloved English-Ukrainian interpreters, Natalia Gaetz and Anya Stempkovska. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian. I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma, to ensuring victims' rights, to the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. Aiming to fully realizing victims' rights, reparative justice focuses not only on the outcome of trials or other processes, but on the reparative value of the moment-to-moment process of trials and of the totality of the relationship of the justice system with the victims as reparative rather than utilitarian and/or re-traumatizing. Today we have an extraordinary panel. Our first presenter is Mazen Darwish, an internationally recognized Syrian human rights defender. Mazen is a lawyer, from the University of Damascus with an MA in International Relations in Paris, ESJ de Paris. Mazen made significant contributions to international legal and electoral committees despite multiple arrests for activism, being subjected to torture, and enforced disappearances. Elected as a commissioner of the International Commission of Jurists, Mazen received over 12 international awards for relentlessly defending human rights. Adriana Portillo Batov is a human rights advocate and survivor of the Guatemala Civil War. After Guatemala's security forces disappeared her father, two daughters aged 10 and 9, 18-month-old sister, and other relatives. Adriana and her two surviving children fled Guatemala for the United States in 1985. She devotes her life to educating communities about multi-generational impacts of torture, disappearances, and war, while seeking accountability of the Guatemalan military for her disappeared family. Alas for us today and for you today, she just returned from Guatemala with dengue fever and is too ill to join us today. But we will incorporate her video into the recording of the webinar later when she's well. Kolbasia Hausu, having fled Central Africa as a torture survivor and arriving in the United Kingdom in 2005, Kolbasia experienced immigration detention and homelessness. After initiating treatment at Freedom from Torture, he held positions at Freedom from Torture for more than 10 years and currently heads the organization's Survivor Leadership and Influencing Directorate. Internationally recognized for his advocacy, in 2020, Kolbasia was awarded the Member of the Order of the British Empire. Olena Podolian, the director of the civil society organization For Post. Olena is a human rights activist and specialist in psychological support for victims of torture. A clinical psychologist and group analyst in Dnipro, Ukraine, she has been providing psychological assistance to victims of war atrocities in the east of Ukraine since 2014. Our very dear friend, Veronika Plotnikova, would provide the comment at the end from the point of view of the Prosecutor General's office in Ukraine. Veronika heads the Coordination Center for the support of victims and witnesses of the Prosecutor General's office in Ukraine. She has been working in the Prosecutor's Institution for over 15 years, leading the specialized units for implementing human rights standards into the prosecutor's services. She's a national expert of Council of Europe. We have 2 hours for the webinar. Each of our panelists will speak for about 10 minutes. Following an interchange among us, I will open the floor to question and brief comments from the virtual audience. We will then conclude with last words. Please use the chat function and we'll do our best to respond to as many as we can. Feel free to direct your question to a particular panelist or to the full panel. For interpretation, please go to the More on your screen, the three dots. Scroll down to interpretation and choose Ukrainian or English as per your preference. I now have the pleasure to offer the screen to Mazen Darvish. Mazen, the screen floor is yours.
I mean, Mazen, before you start, I think there's people that put message on the chat. I think they're asking if there is French translation or something like that. Probably they're speaking French.
What?
I said, people are asking if they can get a help in understanding in French. Can you hear me?
No, I'm afraid
Okay.
not. We should have known about that earlier. We didn't arrange for that. That's too bad. I'm sorry. Mm. I wonder whether there's a way to Google Translate later.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniele. Yeah.
You're welcome. So please, Mazen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniele, and thank you for the ICMT opportunity to be with this distinguished panelist also. Let me start that I have the honor to be in Ukraine also, maybe after only 3 months from the war against Ukraine from Russia. And I was there and I met a lot of the victims in Sumy, in Bucha, in Bordonika. And from my experience, that it's amazing how we are as a victim, we are similar and how we share the same trauma and the same feeling and also the same seeking for justice and accountability. Even if we are too far or even if we are going to speak the same language. But when I speak to the victim in Sumi or in Pucha, except the language, it's the same word coming from us as a Syrian or maybe from any other place. So thank you also for this chance in this date because as maybe all know that, yes, maybe we release from the prison. The torture maybe end in day, but the prison is still inside us and we can't release from the result of the torture, of the disappearance and all of these victim usually suffering from it. It keep and keep working with us. For this, maybe the Syrian victim in general, especially with the refugee waves to Europe or even to the country around Syria, always try seeking for justice, accountability. And this is maybe the most important thing from our experience in Syria, that how we can heal ourselves, how we can honestly go forward and keep acting not as victim, but as survivor in general. For this, organizing the victim, give the voice for the victims themselves. We work a lot in Syria and in Syrian Center, especially in give the leadership for the victim themselves. We try with several kind of victims, especially victim of torture and enforced disappearance, but also Caesar photo victim and even those whose disappearance or gone in the road of the immigrant in the Mediterranean Sea or other places. Organizing the victim through the victim association, give them the voice, leading the advocacy for justice, for accountability, for reparation from the victim themselves. It's make difference. Now today, just I arrival from the court in Paris. We celebrate that the court agreed the design of the arrest warrant against President Bashar al-Assad, who's responsible about the chemical attack also in 2013 and several huge other crimes. The victim, because they are organized, because they work together and seeking justice, not revenge, they can reach this achievement or many other even achievement. So organizing the victim, especially in diaspora, in the refugees community. It's very essential, it's very important for us, and this is how we make difference as a victim, but also as a civil society. It's very important for us also to raise the to not not to raise the expectation, to manage the expectation of the victim. This is also very important. We know when we are talking about justice and accountability, or when we are talking about it's take usually years and years, and the legal process, especially, it's very slow. It need this case we celebrate today, it take from us more than 7 years working. So manage the expectation. We knew that the perpetrator, the president or the other, he will not come voluntarily to the custody. So also we want to be clear why we do this. For us, it's very important to explain the victim all the process, because justice is not only the verdict, all the process. It's part from the justice. And for many of those victims, again, it's especially for the family, for the member of the family who don't know anything about their lover. This work, this advocating for the truth, very essential part from the justice. For them, they need information. They need to know where is their lover. So again, manage the expectation when we knew also that the need of the victim, it's not all in the same level. So when we are talking victim of the enforced disappearance, they have the families, they have need, it's totally different from those who survivor from torture or even from prison. For us, it's very important also from our experience that, as I said, it's not about maybe the verdict, but about that the victim themselves feeling satisfied about the process, about the result, how we can show the respect of the victim, how we can make the victim accept the process, how we can make them believe that even if there is failure or if there is delays in the process or in applying their need, that this is not because we don't respect them or we don't respect their painful, but this is because the process itself could be take long term. So making the victim satisfied about the process itself, it's also part from the healing or part from the justice itself, not only the result or the verdict. Sometimes also, especially we are a refugee in different country, so we faces a lot of cultural problem, for example. And this is also very important for those who's working with us as a victim from the legal or from the different perspective, the legal police, the judges, those who's even social worker or who want to give the help for the victim. We need to know this local culture or local sensitivity for each of those victim group or victim society in general. But also it's one of the challenge, one of the question for us It's about how we can protect those victims from their self, but also we are dealing with a dictatorship regime in Syria and in Russia and in Africa. So our enemy, they are not a human rights defender. So they are war criminal. So how we can protect the victim, especially those who have still family inside the country. This is also one of the very important question, and that there is a lot of victims who want to express their feeling, who they are able to join this sometimes legal procedures, but because they have this worry about safety of the other member of the family, they just watching and feeling angry, bad because they can't join or they can't do what they can. In general, one of the maybe most important example for us, the family of the missing person in Syria. We see how they work together. More than 10 victim association work together and advocate everywhere in the local level, but also in several countries, in the UN, in New York especially, and they succeed with the civil society to create the IIMP, which the independent institution for missing person in Syria. And this is the first time we have a UN international body working only to clarify the fate of the missing person in one country. And we hope that this is, could be become a model, even not only in Syria, for all these countries who suffering from the same problem. But this is will not be able to done without this working collective work from the victim themselves, from their family, in very strategic way, and with supporting from the civil society and using the tools which we have it already, or even go to create new tools like this a new mechanism. I can speak also about maybe a lot of good steps done in regarding the accountability in Syria, led from the victim themselves, especially women. And today, uh, uh, we have this result, arrest warrant against the president when he in the presidency. I just want to say that because there is a brave, a Syrian lady, Syrian Franco lady, who suffering and she's victim from the chemical weapons attack, but she decided to go ahead and to challenge this regime through the legal process. So this kind of victory, it's possible. So also we need to give space and we need to support the victim themselves when they lead their advocacy, when they lead their demand, they make difference. Thank you very much, but I will be very happy also to learn from other experience and to hear if there is any question in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mazen. And thank you in particular for not only mentioning the phrase manage expectations, but also trying to spell it out, because we need to become very sophisticated about that. Perhaps this panel will write a paper together on what we mean by that. So thank you, and thank you also for indicating the importance of cultural understanding too. That is another extremely important aspect of what reparative justice should mean. respecting the victim's culture and not expecting the victim to behave according to whatever culture the particular court belongs to. We can talk a whole lot more about that too. Thank you very much, Mazen. As I said before, Adriana is not joining us. She's too ill. But she would have been, you see, we have Mazen who is speaking to us from Paris, but is originally from Syria. And she is originally from Guatemala. She would have spoken to us from the United States. But Kolbasia, bless God, you are here. And Kolbasia, as I said, began in Chad. And is indeed in London. So we have a very, very international panel today. And this is a perfect example of how the world can help each other when we get together to do good. I want to just, Kolbasia, right in 1 second, to take 1 second into the chat. Thank you, Carney, for explaining that actually, while we don't have a French interpretation, there is you know, when you scroll down, you can see the phrase show captions icon. And you can then go to my speaking language and select French. The translation is not terrific, but it gives you an idea of what the speaker speaks about. And yes, indeed, forgive us for not planning, knowing that in Chad they do speak French. That's why Kolbasia can answer you in French. We should have thought about that. So forgive us, but this is not the best, but secondarily available. Kolbasia, we've been waiting for you. Thank you so much. The screen is totally yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And can I just quickly try to translate, you know, what you say in French so that people can use the.
Of course. Please, please.
OK, Prince et puis le collègue francophone. Est-ce que vous voyez l'option CC? Donc, avec l'option CC, vous pouvez choisir quelle langue pour la transcrire. Donc, si vous choisissez français, donc tout ce qui se dit sera, sera interprété en français. Ce n'est pas parfait, mais c'est l'option qu'on a pour l'instant, quoi. Je ne sais pas si vous êtes encore là, mais sinon, c'est aussi une option pour vous, quoi, pour suivre en français. OK. So thank you very much. And I am honestly honored to be here today and really speaking to you all. And I think you know, the perspective that I want to bring is perspective of refugees and torture survivors, you know, coming in the West and try to seek your protections, you know, such and through the process, you know, the challenges that you know, I faced and challenges that quite a lot of people face, and how could we, you know, make it so that, you know, the challenges is lesser, and so I, you know, I come, you know, to the UK as somebody that's seeking protection after fleeing, you know, after fleeing torture. So I presented myself, you know, to the UK authority, saying, you know, I'm here and I want to seek refugees, so that you know, I'm fleeing. I think the next thing that happened. So I was put in the immigration detention center. So, you know, prior to be put in immigration detention center, Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. I'm very, very happy you're here. I was afraid you had a total power failure in Kiev. Sorry, guys. Good news. Sorry, Kolbasia, for the interruption, but it's a wonderful interruption. Veronica is with us.
Okay, great.
Veronica, you're listening to Kolbasia.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The person who's speaking now is Kolbasia. Go ahead. I'm sorry, but
No
this is
problem.
a happy interruption.
Yeah. So, you know, prior to get to the UK, I had a seemingly control of my destiny in my hand. I have, you know, I have chosen to flee, and also I have chosen the ability, to go somewhere. And part of that, I have a degree of control. The other part, I don't have a degree of control. But the destination where I am going, most of the time I have, control. If I did not like it there, so that I just move, to other place. But with the belief that I'm going to a place or to a country where, the human right law is at the highest standard, that also that the refugee conventions, the international law will be there, to that I can take privilege of that international law. And the refugee convention is one of those law. The torture convention is one of those law. Because I believe at that moment I believe that I am stateless because I'm fleeing from my country. So my country I'm not representing that country anymore. But then I don't belong to any country, but I belong to the only right and the law that I can use is the international law. So when I reach the UK, I have the feeling that finally I reach a final destination. I reach place where I can seek asylum, I can seek protection, and I'm gonna be assessed and I'm gonna be protected, as such. But then my quick first interaction with the UK was completely dramatic in a sense where I was put in immigration detention center and I was in a process of being deported. And mind at that time, I was very sick, weren't well because of, the impact of the torture and so because I was constantly bleeding. But then I did ask her to see a doctor when I was in an immigration detention center. They said, okay, then, now it's late. Tomorrow we're gonna organize an appointment to see a doctor and so. But at the end of the day, that never happened. But then when I was in that, I wasn't there long. But for other people, they stay in the detention for very long. I was there for a period of a week. But I could not sleep because I was thinking I'm going to be deported, and all the sacrifice that I have done is come to zero. I'm going to be going back to square zero again, and I don't know what will happen to me there. And at that moment where really the trauma itself really start manifesting, because I start, having nightmare, having like, headache. I could not sleep, and post-trauma disorder is really start, manifesting, to me at that, those times. So then I, to cut the story short, a few days later, I was processed. And then I was granted refugee status, and then I was released from the immigration detention center. And then I find myself in London, but then I find myself homeless again, in London. So tried to really to navigate homelessness in London, and also was in the winter period. January, February wasn't fun time, for you to be in homeless in London. And then I was referred to Freedom from Torture organization by an organization that's supporting asylum seekers and refugees, because I was displaying so much of the, trauma effect and so. And then I went through Freedom from Torture and, receive a rehabilitation. But, during my time at the rehabilitation at Freedom from Torture, that's what I started really questioning how I was treated as a human being coming to this country seeking protection. When I wasn't given a chance kind of to present my case. I was put in immigration detention center and I was treated as a criminal. I felt that I have done nothing wrong in saving my life and coming and seeking protection. And nobody fleeing persecution and fleeing torture and or sexual violence should be put in immigration detention center and treated as a criminal. All of us need to be treated with respect or dignity. And then from that moment, I start thinking about how can I influence decision makings and how can I influence, the UK in order for the UK to change the policies that really taking into consideration, torture survivors, particularly, and also sexual violence survivors, as well, so that, people can be processed accordingly. People can be, assessed. People can be treated with respect and with dignity, and people should be welcome. And then when people have all the necessary resources in hand in order to present the case, so that when they present the case, they will present a strong case, and the official will make a decision whether the person meet the requirement according to the Refugee Convention, and then the person will be granted refugee or not. And it should be done in a fair and a just way. So then if it's deemed that the person needed a protection, the protection will be given. If the person does not need of a protection, so then the protection is not going to be given, but it's done in a systematic and in a fair and a just way, so that people can can be fairly judged. And then I start doing advocacy and campaigning and since that. And also I think the other element that is really important, it is as well that, I mean, through the justice itself or through the healing, it is that it is really important to understand healing or understand justice, from the survivor's, perspective or victim, perspective. Otherwise we would not address the need of the survivors, because justice is a very big big field. And within that field, there is certain justice that can be given quickly. There is certain justice that can take long, and also there is certain justice that certain people require that type of justice. Other people require different type of justice. But for us to understand that, if we don't talk to the survivors and a victim, how would we understand the different need and the requirement that survivors have in terms of the justice that need to be achieved? And also, just remind me in terms of the timing, yeah. Just remind me in terms of the timing. So, and also, it is really important that rehabilitation should be something that is really including, part of it is seeking justice, and part of protection, and part of the refugees, granting asylum and protection especially for torture survivors and also for sexual violence survivors. Because there is no many people, also survivors, that understand how trauma or torture and sexual violence can completely destroy you, destroy your character, can destroy your thinking and isolate you, and creating life difficult for you, and not understanding that rehabilitation or therapy can be a source of release, a source of allow you to understand what is going on in your mind, and also allow you to move forward with your life, accepting whatever that you have. So also advocating for state and also government to implement rehabilitation as part of a process of healing or process of seeking justice is absolutely paramount, paramount as well. And also reparation, part of the justice, also reparation that survivors as well need. I think I'm gonna say that, and then I'm gonna close. I have been in Kosovo like a few years back, and they have a process of administrative justice, for survivors, which I find it really exemplary, where while the judicial justice may take long and all those kind of things, at least survivors have that opportunity, to go through administrative justice where they can get certain degree of rehabilitation, and so and I have colleague organization in Kosovo which working with survivors, Care City, which working with survivors in Kosovo, with doing a kind of fantastic job in allow certain survivors.
Is that Farid?
Yeah. Farida, Farida.
She's here with us. She's
Oh, she's
here with
here. Oh,
us.
oh, I'm
I'm sure
sorry.
she'll have something to say later. And we just had an amazing webinar on Kosovo. So
Oh,
thank
okay.
you for referring to that. Go ahead, Kolbasia.
Yeah. I think that's an example where also I think allow survivors, because it's not part of the reparation. So not all survivors, because the stigma is there. Not all survivors want to come forward and also then have the wrath of the community in terms of the stigma. So you need to find a way to allow survivors kind of to benefit from that administrative justice, so that they're not going to be also singled out. And I find it, the process that Farida and her team put there to allow survivors, to benefit from that, and also going through rehabilitation without really, or the community knows that people going through rehabilitation is also fantastic. So I think I'm gonna stop here, and then as a Mazen as well, I'll be happy to kind of take question later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kolbasia, and thank you for making the connection and for adding to the challenges for victim survivors of torture, the journey, the challenges throughout the journey, not only in the reparative justice system, however, in the injustices that happen to them across the journey before they even reach the criminal justice system. And the, the meaning of longing for justice and the relationship between longing for justice and finding a sense of home. And I mean homelessness, not only literally as you have experienced it, but also psychosocially, psychologically, a sense of being in your one's place, in peace as much as possible. So there's so much richness. Thank you so much. We next have Olena. Hello, dear. Oops, you disappeared again. Hello, hello, Olena. Uh, uh, Please tell the audience where you are speaking from. As I said, from Dnieper in eastern Ukraine. Am I right? Close to the border of Romania. Uh, so please go ahead. Olena, you muted yourself?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had some problems with the internet, but now I'm reconnected. Yes, I'm in touch with you. So yes, usually I do live and work in the city of Dnipro, but now I'm not far from Romania. Dnipro is in a different place. It is in the eastern part of Ukraine, much more to the east. And I hope that I will no longer have any issues with my internet connection.
Yes, we
Now,
need big luck with internet connection during wartime in particular. Go ahead.
okay, so today I would like to focus on the Ukrainian context, obviously, and I would like to share some observations based on the work of our clinical team. When we speak about documenting crimes of war and torture in particular, we need to keep in mind two aspects. First thing, it is that the survivor needs to be the focus in the center of our care. And in the process of documenting, the rights needs to be respected and interests need to be met, needs and interests to the extent possible. And the second aspect that unfortunately we do not often mention, it is that what's critically important is the motivation of documenters when they start documenting, because somehow we think about motives of perpetrators when we investigate war crimes. So to confirm the degree of their guilt, restore justice, we need to understand the motive. But the motivation of documenters and also journalists, whistleblowers, that's also important because this is something that influences the process of collecting the facts and how these facts are going to be presented and how they will act, what role they will play in the society, the more so in our context. When we have all the reasons to think, it's not proven, but we have all the reasons to suspect that war crimes are committed to demoralize the society, to deprive the society of psychic and mental resources to resist and thus to influence the entire society and the behavior of the society. The crimes that have been committed, we have a lot of information in open sources, and this information was disseminated, has been disseminated and presented in such a way that as many people as possible could see the survivors. And I will go back to that statement because this is kind of a controversial topic, but we need to discuss that. But now let me go back to what happens to an individual when they undergo the documenting process. We know that sources of evidence may be information from open sources, photo, video recording, evidence testimonies of survivors and witnesses, expert forensic opinions and conclusions. But in our context, we see that survivors often feel that they are the central source of evidence, because a lot of organizations suggest that they undergo documenting process and they motivate the survivors sometimes to do that several times. And they come up with quite convincing arguments and statements. However, in the context of the military conflict, the survivor should not carry the burden of restoring the justice for the interest of a group or the society. They may do that, they can, but they are not obliged to. And in our work, we often hear from the survivors that this is a frequent reason why they agree to re-testify again and again. I mean, people are guided by that. They want to restore justice for the society. However, that results in a range of negative and even undermining consequences. And let me focus on the most obvious and important of them. Someone who retold his or her story many times, even if they realize that justice will not be restored overnight anyway, they invest a lot of efforts into those stories. And even without realizing that, they start expecting satisfaction earlier than it is actually possible. unfortunately. And we see now that even if we speak about this with the survivors, and I do not use the legal term victim to leave some chance for people to recover. So when we talk to survivors, we try not to use the legal term victim. I mean, in the clinical work, we don't use it. So then people start expecting for satisfaction early, and also from those people to whom they testify. And this is unconscious internal conflict. If you invest a lot of efforts into something, you expect that this gives some fruit, some result, even if cognitively we realize that, well, justice is going to come, but maybe after many years. But already now, here and now, we want to see some result. And the problem is that when another problem is that when someone retells the story again and again, and these testimonies were either not properly documented or not used as evidence in court, and it is just about documenting the facts, then after three or maybe even after two times, it may happen so that it is difficult for this individual to recall details. And we know that when someone is asked many times, expecting that they would come up with a lot of details, we understand that some facts may get distorted in the process, also unconsciously. This is how human memory works.
And this is a problem with which we have to work with. And I believe that Ukraine is not the only country which is living through such difficulties in terms of documenting the military crimes, war crimes, because a lot of organizations are
Would you,
working here in Ukraine, and there are a lot of authors who are collecting the evidence.
Natalia, would you please speak closer to the mic? Thank you.
Так, будь ласка. Is
Go
it better
ahead.
now? Is it better now? Mhm. And a lot of organizations at present are working in Ukraine and they're collecting the evidence. And the problem is, and I understand that we are not the only ones who face a lot of factors, but going back to the motivation of those who start collecting this evidence, whether they realize and understand what consequences are going to affect the victims and the society if these evidence are not going to be properly collected and if they are not going to be submitted to the Ukrainian General Prosecutor's Office. And if people repeat this and we, it, together with my colleagues, are very much concerned about the following. A lot of representatives of the activists of the civil society, the way they identify them, they are trying to collect the evidence of the war crimes. And I am concerned about this from the point of view that quite often the survivors are under the situation uh, when there are few people who can collect their evidence or access to these people is limited. There is no there is no access and there is no alternative. It is being done online. It might take place in the countries of Europe, or it might happen in the Russian Federation, where our citizens were deported to. And I am thinking what an individual who suffered so much can feel, what they should feel when they cannot choose the person who is going to document their evidence, when she has to normalize the the individual with the Russian citizenship because they offer them assistance. This is a very difficult question. Actually, I don't believe that all these people are guided only with the destructive motivations or only humanistic motivation. From our experience, we know that the cases might be very different. But I've mentioned that the survivor has to be as center of our care. And at present, we do not have time to discuss in depth the response of the people when they are offered to get their evidence documented by the citizens of the Russian Federation and what feelings as are evoked in the victims when it happens. But I think that this should be discussed as well because this complicates the context in which we live at present and this increases the number of problems which we have to take care of.
Go ahead, Olena.
Well, if I can continue, I will, because I thought that we had a very strict timing, and
Yeah, you
I
do,
thought
but
that I have exhausted my time.
that's okay. We can move to the dialogue because we have one leg. You're absolutely right. But because Adriana is too ill to be with us, we have a little. Yeah, we have a little. We can feel a little more flexible with the time. So while I appreciate it, each of yours respect for the time, we can feel a bit lax. But let's so let's complete it now and move to the dialogue among you. I mean, let's complete the presentation part and move to the dialogue among you. I think it's extremely important that you brought up the the same way Kolbasia opened up the journey, really the post-victimization, post-trauma journey, all the way from the trauma forward. We actually call it the trauma after the trauma, right? Or I've written a great deal about that. I don't think you even noticed that we're all talking about uh, what happened after the trauma. It's amazing. But this is what reparative justice is. It's a complex journey. And Elena, I'm so glad that you brought in the multiplicity of actors, even those who are supposedly, not supposedly, I would like to believe, want to help, right? Such as journalists, extremely important profession uh, with extremely important power to help. But indeed, if not, like everyone else, including psychotherapists, if not trained, the power can go to harm as well. So the issue is really specialized training. And I'm reminded very vividly that, the original email from Eva Hofmanska from Yellow Flowers, who who approached me to train lawyers. I mean, not necessarily investigators, uh, in reparative justice. And what you're saying is not only lawyers, anyone who interfaces with victims has the power to harm them or to help repair and help them heal. And what reparative justice says is that actually every moment in this long journey can be an opportunity to harm again or harm anew or heal, right? Becoming part of the healing process and the justice process. And we are seeing it more and more. And just in your three presentations, we see the complexity of that. Mazen, would you please join us? We need to see your warm face.
For
Thank
sure.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Veronica is with us. She hasn't had the opportunity to hear Mazen, which is, even though, Veronica, you met Mazen at the rehearsal, I'm so happy about that. And Mazen elaborated beautifully on the ideas that he shared with you then of how healing can happen throughout the process. But Veronica, before we go to the dialogue, we are all so thankful to have you here from the system to comment on what you've learned, what the system can learn, what the system can do to respond to survivors' needs, what it should do to respond in a reparative way. And then we open up for dialogue, but because Veronica is responding to the three of you and to all the comments in between, I would like all of us to be totally present. Veronica, the floor is yours. No problem, we have wonderful interpreters.
I am really grateful to all the panelists who told about their own experience. And I share the opinion of Olena, uh, which she shared with us as for the Ukrainian context. What can I tell you to this effect? And what can I tell you what the system faces in Ukraine? And I don't think that we are unique in this respect. Our role is not unique at all, but we have to be responsible for what's going on in Ukraine in this respect. And all the work which is related to justice, because the justice has to be built through the optics of the survivor. And survivorship has to be in the center, and it has to move along the route which is most acceptable to the survivor, but it has to be quite honest and should not pretend to be some magic wand which will provide quick and simple solutions. We have to maintain a honest dialogue and form the realistic expectations. But at the same time, it is extremely important to take into account everything you have mentioned to avoid traumatizing after trauma. This is about the following. The people in the criminal proceedings, while getting the justice, would not feel at the object or a source of evidence which will be exhausted, and then nobody goes back to this victim. And that this is provision of the subjective nature to the to the survivors, and so that they can control their own life while aspiring for justice. For us, it is very important to cooperate with the colleagues from the civil society. I would like to thank Elena for raising this issue. This issue is about the multiple documenting and interviews and interrogations and things like that, because the survivor should not be a lawyer or a jurist, and they should not understand what procedural form are going to be applied to their evidence, because people who are telling their stories to another person who seems to be responsible to help achieve justice would perceive such an individual as one who is responsible to relating the story to those bodies which actually will provide the justice. But we understand that the main aspect and the main work should be concentrated on behalf of the state. The individual feels, deceived somewhat after 5 or 6 times having related his or her story to those who are documenting it. And after this data have been submitted to the government authorities, we still have to repeat the interview to formalize all the evidence so that they would become really legal. So from the judicial point of view, we explain the individual that most probably this is not going to be the last interview, that the individual will have to participate in the proceedings on the national hearing, or maybe even the proceedings in the International Criminal Court. Our task is to lead the individuals through these processes to, while minimizing the risks of re-traumatization, so that we are not becoming the source of pain in the future. The prosecutors and the investigators who interview the individuals are not physicians, and they are not physicians to these persons, but they should not be those who torture while asking the details of those stories, which are not especially necessary during the proceedings. This is the question of preparation to the interviews and engagement of the specialists to get prepared to the interrogations and interviews, and so that it will be possible to establish communication with the survivor who was not only traumatized, but maybe is still living through this trauma. And we have various circumstances. We have people who have left the occupied territories by Russia. We have people who are IDPs and they have changed their lives completely and entirely. We have the people who are staying outside Ukraine in foreign countries at present, and they are completely, isolated from Ukraine, and they and the Kalbasi said that they feel homelessness, people who are in a difficult situation in the society, which does not understand the issues of this individual, and people feel very lonely. And at the same time, they can form unrealistic expectations from certain processes. And that's why the focus on what we are trying to implement at present, and what we are trying to include into our legal system, which is working with the war crimes and other international crimes. We have to move the focus from the procedures to the individuals, to people. And we have to more proactively form the skills with the skills of understanding, working, and trauma-informed approaches are to be developed. To develop the communication with the survivors, and to take into account the understanding of justice, which which are aspired for various survivors. They see it differently, and especially when we are talking about people who went through the proceedings, they were not able to see the specific perpetrator, because these processes are taking care in absentia. And sometimes, after going through all these procedures and being aware of the sentence, Well, people say that nevertheless we have not seen the perpetrators. We did not look into their eyes of the individual who were torturing us. We are explaining them that these proceedings are absolutely necessary because international justice has a very long-lasting memory. And we have to do everything possible. So as soon as the war crime perpetrator will make a mistake and will appear in the country where he or she could be detained, and there is the Ukrainian justice and the international justice would be able to to punish them. So it is very important to hear the needs of the survivors, what is important for them. And we have to develop their strategies of their work, take into account all these aspects which I've mentioned before, because we are doing all this work not to report that we are prosecuting a certain number of criminals. We understand that the Russian war crimes are, uh, are not are unexhaustible. But we have to work with the traumas of the survivors. We are very grateful for the experience which is shared with us by the colleagues from other countries, and especially those who have been suffering in the war conflicts and have the experience of being traumatized during the wars. And this experience is very important for us. And we have to have some horizon of planning and imagine how all this will be looking in 10 or 20 years from now, because it's going to be a long-term process. But the process of healing the society should be developed at present. So thank you very much, and thank you for an opportunity to participate in such joint events, and so that we can discuss the pain and the ways to address this pain and the difficulties during this process.
Thank you, Veronica. Yeah. There's so much more to say, but we will together. I see a lot of people commenting in Ukrainian, in writing. It doesn't help everyone because we don't have the translation to English in the writing. So please, technically, those of you, including Olena, I want you wait to actually say it so the rest of the audience benefits from your wisdom. And that's true for everyone who is writing in Ukraine. Please wait to say it so we all learn from you. Veronica, thank you again for going back to Mazen's point of managing expectation. Having worked with this for over 4 decades, I'm still struggling with the notion of realistic expectations. And what does it mean? And I don't particularly care. I get a little nervous when people say managing expectations or unrealistic expectations. I think it would be wonderful if we, again, write together, survivors and professionals together, write together what we mean by these words, because we throw them out as if we know what we mean. I don't think we do. I think sometimes it's insulting to even use the word to manage someone's expectation. They were managed enough. That's part of the trauma. So maybe we're talking about managing how we behave, the professionals behave. Okay, we need to sit together seriously, maybe a few days, and write it all together. I don't think we will be able to even find the right way of asking the question, just by a series of webinars, even though I love our webinars. I think it's the very best. Okay? But these issues are core issues. They go to the heart of how people experience trauma, how people experience their lives, their relationship with others, and with justice after trauma. And what do we expect from each other? What are our expectations from the victims? Right? I think Mazen and I had an interesting meeting about that here in New York. We were lucky enough because what we expect, it can be written a whole book about, right? Before you meet the victim, what goes through your mind? Are you going to meet someone broken who can't even talk, who should be managed in some ways? Or are you going to meet a hero, a person who survived and doesn't need any help, or et cetera, et cetera? So we have to manage our own expectations too, of course, not just the victim's expectations. So I think it's brilliant that these ideas came up for discussion. That only attests to the seriousness of how we finally are meeting the notion of reparative justice. And not just to send the victim to therapy, right? We are not just talking about that. Okay, so I'm sure that each one of you has either questions or comments to everything you heard and said today. Who wants to start? Mazen, you may as well start. You were the first one. Go ahead. And please feel free to unmute all of the participants, please. Not the audience yet. The Olena, Kovacia, Veronica, so we can have an open discussion before we go to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. I totally agree. This is need a lot of work and a lot of discussion. What the meaning of expect, but not only from the victim, but as you mentioned, from also the professional or those who's working with the victim themselves. Because yes, in the end, the victim, they are human. So yeah, they are suffering, they have their illness, they have their needs, they have also their demand, but also they are heroes. They survive. They faces and ugly, sometimes miserable circumstances, and keep fighting. All of these things, it's true. So how we can deal with those people, but even especially those who's not in their environment. So I believe that me myself, the same victim, when I am in my country, talking my language, dealing with the streets and the area which I know, familiar with, I'm totally different from this refugee who's in Paris, don't understand 90% from the language, and also all the new society I was there. So there's no one standard or one type of the victim or one even fix emotional. It goes every day and every time. So we are just a human faces all of these layers of feeling of a problem, of also struggle, and it's important that if that victim need understanding, but also it's not to show them that they are those weak, sad, poor people, just we encourage them or show sympathy. I believe that also we need to deal with them in respectful way. So to understand their need, but also to respect their situation. This is, I think, a key. But when we are talking about also managing the expectation of the victim, this is also, I believe that even if it's sometimes difficult, but it's very needed because some of the victim, when they are, by example, joining a legal process and accountability, by example. So they sometimes feel because they have this need for justice. Sometimes also we need to be very honest with them, tell them this is will not in the end lead by example in these cases in Europe in Abyssinia, by example, the perpetrator will not next day of the verdict they will came custody. But this is, it's very important to save the narrative, by example. This is very important to have a legal decision from expert, from court, from judges, said that, yes, this is true, that this crime happened, and those people who's responsible about it. So victims, they are human, and we need to understand their needs, but in respectable way.
Thank you. I see, Kavasia, you're eager
Yeah,
to comment.
yeah. Thank
We
you.
are eager to hear you. Yes.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. And I think thank you for, every, panelist that really contributed. And now, Veronica, Mazen, and also, Alena. I think, you raise really important point in terms of what is managing expectation mean? Because I think that's the root of the question. What does that mean when we said managing, expectation? And like Mazen is saying, in certain area you need to manage expectation. In certain area you don't need to manage expectation. I think for me
What
it
do you
comes
mean? Can
down.
you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I'm good. So I think for me it comes down to how central whatever you do in survival are or victim are or not. All right. Because I think as Mazen also said that there is no one solution that fit everybody. No, because you have to consider every survivor as an individual. And as an individual, as survivors have a different need from the next survivors. Even within the one family, if there is a few survivors, one survivor from the same family need are different from each other. The need of a survivor as a mother is different from the survivor as a child, and so how would you take that on consideration so that you have the survivor centered approach? Because survivors have their own objective, have their own goals, right? Whether that you still, I mean, in the country where the abuse happened, or you left and then you went somewhere. When when you have survived, so then you have an objective. After that, you have an objective, and your objective, it is that for seeking justice, and then what type of justice you're seeking. Restorative justice, and also I think legal
Do you
justice.
mean restorative justice is the justice that integrates the offender back into the community after the offender has paid his or her dues. Do you mean restorative justice or do you mean reparative
I
justice?
mean, I mean reparative justice. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean reparative justice, and in that reparative justice, there is certain layer. My understanding, because I talk with a lot of survivors. Survivor said, all right, then. So if I need to, because I think, that's the point of, Mazen saying where, survivor need to understand that if you're going through the justice court and, bringing perpetrator to justice, and, You think that you're going to be, the perpetrator is going to be locked in the next few days and all those kind of things. That's not realistic. So that's why we need to understand that if you're launching into that journey, it's a long-term journey. It can take 30 years. It can take 40 years. Nobody can guarantee how long that's gonna take. And we have so many examples that how long it is. Therefore, when survivors understand that,
your own people,
yeah,
how long did it take the Chadian people to
yes,
even
yeah,
begin to receive the reparation? First of all,
yeah.
to receive or to have the judgment on reparations, and how long has it taken to wait for the reparations to actually come?
Yeah, it took 30 years in order for the
Exactly.
for the justice to be pronounced. Until
Right.
today, people are still waiting for the compensation.
Right.
Right? And some people died, some people are still waiting, and then so and so. But then, that's what the point earlier when I was saying, like, the example of the Kosovo, where, those kind of don't have the administrative justice. While, those people, while waiting, to address, the bigger issue, what is now reparation that we need to provide for people right now to meet
Mm-hmm.
to meet the immediate need. So if you have that in mind, therefore there is certain need of survivors that can be covered. And also I think it's really important. I think that's also part of the issue. It is not understanding what survivors' need are, from the survivors and the victim themselves. Because I think we that work on providing support for survivors and organizations, we have set of pillars that those the things that we're going to be achieving. But if it's not consulted from the survivors in helping us on a set of those pillars, we set up pillars, but at the end it does not meet the survivors' need. So how would you set a pillar with survivors that shaping you, helping you set those kind of pillars? Right? Again, Mazen say very good point. I mean, like you born in a street, you know the street in and out. You come to a different place, your need could be completely different
Exactly.
because the challenges that you have to face, whether
Mhm.
that languages, whether that communities, all those things that create more of the dilemma that we need to understand as well. So that's why if survivors come over questions so that I need this one, therefore you have to understand how to meet those needs for that survivors. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you can go on and on. I know that. Yes. To share with everyone, um, not only a substantive idea, I want to share with everyone that next year uh, is the 40th anniversary of the adoption uh, by the General Assembly of the Victim Declaration, that is the Declaration on Rights for Victims, and the 20th anniversary of the rights, the resolution on the rights to reparations. I participated in working on both and on the provisions of the International Criminal Court. And we are organizing a meeting on victims' rights, revisiting all victims' rights. So all of these ideas will have to be presented, and maybe we can work towards presenting exactly these kind of ideas that you are sharing today. Not maybe. That's what it's about. So we will all stay in touch and work very hard to prepare it in such a way that it will have a meaning, not just, a celebration of sorts. So, Olena, please, you have written a great deal in the chat, and I feel very deprived. So please share it with us, so we have the interpretation.
Right, thank you. Well, there was a question from one of the participants on
We are not yet about the participants' questions. Right now we are simply in the dialogue here. We will go to the questions right after we finish this dialogue. So do you have any further thoughts among us? Go ahead.
Right. I have heard very important statements, and I'm so grateful to Mazen. Thank you for highlighting the expectations that we have, expectations regarding the survivors. But I would like to expand this a little bit. Basically, everything that happens in a certain context. And if we now try to switch from one individual survivor to the general Ukrainian context, we can see and place in this general context stories of victims of crimes of war, and we will see how these stories that have become public already, how they are living on and what role they perform. I mentioned that briefly in my presentation, but let me highlight the aspect of expectations. In our society, in the Ukrainian society, we also have some expectations about how survivors are supposed to behave. We kind of expect that all of them, well, if their stories become public, we expect that they turn out to be patriotic people, that they will take care of interests of the society, that they will do their best to aspiring for victory. And that's human. Some people are aware of those expectations, some actually never undertook any objectives like that, being aware of something. But let's extrapolate that to our partner countries. I mean, when I talk to my colleagues, psychotherapists or human rights activists, psychologists in other countries, I detect that they have very similar expectations for Ukrainians in general. I mean, my idea is that it is interesting to see how people who survived crimes very often become like personifications of the society in general for us inside the country and outside in general. And that's important to note. And now, if I tell you that during spring and summer 2022, when there were so huge atrocities, mass crimes that the world became aware of, among other things, because the perpetrators did not even try to hide that. So a lot of journalists from various countries came and tried to, well, there were a lot of efforts to get direct contact information of survivors. They needed stories. They were looking for stories. And then we try to communicate that to journalists to explain the consequences if so much attention is paid to that. Not grounding on documented cases, not listening to experts, but when they want to see kind of a month or a week after the event, they want to directly contact the survivor, the person who suffered that. And then they responded, they said almost all of them the same thing. People will understand better. People understand storytelling better. They understand it better when it is conveyed from first person. And then I told them, well, okay, people understand better, or maybe it's just about that more people will click your website and read your paper. I mean, when someone has just survived a tragic event, huge atrocity, the context, the chaotic context where they live is very hazardous. Well, obvious that they cannot really have a very clear vision of how they want to speak about themselves, how much they want to disclose. They cannot yet discover, regain control over their lives. And this is what all the survivors need. So in this way, the person, on the one hand, encounters certain hazards, and they also create this perception. And this is, of course, something that needs to be done and followed by people who work with the information, but I'm speaking about consequences. I mean, in this way, survivors create a certain impression of Ukrainians as a nation that is almost disoriented, exhausted, has no energy to resist. And when in the society we face reactions from survivors that do not meet our expectations, where they seem to be not patriotic enough or not aspiring to freedom enough, to victory enough, I mean, and that results in very negative consequences at the societal level, because that results in fragmented society, and then we lose this common grounds. We immediately start seeing a lot of differences, and that gives us a lot of feelings. It's not that I expect that international journalists should be very sensitive to that they have this therapeutic approaches and understanding, but we need to think about what we could do about it, because in our time, the way how the perpetrators distort information, how they may present the information in various contexts, that is something that enhances and deteriorates the effect of those crimes, the impact of those crimes that were committed. So this is really one crime or 1,000 crimes, they are intensified.
This is,
and we often frightening. Just one more statement. Let me share a subjective opinion. I do not pretend to be very objective there, but we are kind of anxious about application of nuclear weapons, but in the blind spot is that what's going on already, what's happening already, that is worse than nuclear weapons. And for me, this is how perpetrators deal with the information and the kind of contacts they create when they manipulate with stories of the survivors, how they manipulate the behavior of people, because crimes, they attract a lot of attention. Everybody wants to highlight that. But if the context is distorted, if coverage of the stories happens immediately after the events, or if the events are still ongoing, massive events, then what's the context that we get? What is the result? I believe that's a very important question. Thank you.
absolutely. And to refer to the chat, now I'm beginning to refer to the chat with your permission. Irina Frankova just said what an important point. Do not harm is not just for doctors. Indeed. And when I was president of the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, I created curricula in education and training. It is in 1989. How many years? I didn't count. A curricula in all professions that interface with trauma. It's even a United Nations instrument. But I think one of my plans is indeed based exactly on what you said, Olena, is to have not only reparative justice, but reparative journalism, reparative policing, reparative medical doctors, right? Doctoring, all of the professions who interface with victims. And Kolbasiel, we can add the police, right? And law enforcement, particularly for refugee situations, or we can really be extremely creative. And the more we learn from these kind of discussions, the more we can really contribute. And so, there's so much wisdom. Veronica, I saw your hand. You want to say something in 1 minute because I want other people. I want people. We have so many amazing uh, experts in the audience with us. Go ahead, Veronica.
So what's important for us is that sometimes in our mind we come up with a perfect profile of a victim, what they should be, how they should behave. And if someone doesn't meet these expectations, this profile, then we start victim blaming, because actually the survivor may not be a nice person in their life, and that's okay. And before these traumatizing events happened or after that, they may abuse alcohol, or their behavior may be antisocial, but it doesn't deprive him or her of this trauma status. And if somebody doesn't meet our expectations of an ideal, perfect profile, it doesn't mean that this person doesn't need help. And what was mentioned by Kolbasia, I agree that the needs of survivors are so different. We cannot come up with a checklist and just check the boxes.
Absolutely.
In our work now, we are implementing
I'm sorry, it's confusing. Who is
so
speaking?
we are implementing the concept.
Go ahead, Veronica.
Okay, so I mean, for some of the survivors, it is important to recover the legal status, and only after that, the person, the individual, will be able to receive psychological care. Some are in acute conditions, and without primary psychological care, all the other elements would not be helpful. For others, it is very important to receive help, not for themselves, but for the dear ones, for the relatives. And this is how they implement their mission, thinking about that they were able to protect their dear ones. So all the stories are different, and looking at them through the lens of that the survivor needs to express his or her needs and get control over their life, well, we cannot like force good things on people. You cannot say, I know better what you need. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind that the person is traumatized, and from time to time, they need coordination and help, and they need resilience and support from a side. I believe that's our challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. And now let me run to whatever we can do in the time left to the question and answers and to the chats. Then, Olena, you'll have your chance to add, all of you. So we have two anonymous questions. One anonymous question is, how are those caring for survivors taking care of themselves? Very important. I don't know why anonymous, because it should be stated publicly that those who are working with survivors must take care of themselves. Otherwise, and provisions should be afforded to them. Otherwise, they might not even do their work very well. Huh? How can you remain, quote, objective if you are not taking care of integrating the trauma into your understanding? So that's a whole other not only webinar, a whole huge course. I've written a great deal about that. Please, not only I, a whole lot of the experts in this audience, and you can find a lot of it in our library. The second anonymous question is, how do you help survivors understand? I think, Olena, that's to you. How do you help survivors understand that they are part of a larger project of terrorism designed to demotivate and demoralize the larger society? Not only to you, Elena, that's a major question. And it should have a webinar of its own. So let me just, Robbie, is Mary still here? Eva, if you can speak not more than 2 minutes, you will have the floor too. And Farida, please honor us also with your own intervention. And then I will look through the chat for the other questions. Robbie, can you please
Mary is no longer with us, unfortunately.
So Mary left. Mary brought up a very important issue. She apologized that she has to run to the airport, but she said very importantly something realistically correct, that so much impunity has happened throughout the world regarding torture, that in itself makes it difficult for torture survivors to even expect justice. So please, I'm throwing all these questions to you, to your wisdom. There's so much challenge here. So if Mary is not here, would you give, please, the mic to Eva and then to Farida? Farida is here. Eva, are you? She left again. Come on.
I am here.
I see Farida. Eva, are you here?
I think Eva is not.
Don't do that to me again, Eva. Robbie, is Eva here?
I don't see the name in there, sorry.
Eva Hofmanska.
No, she is no longer with us.
Farida, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for creating such a great platform to share and discuss, to hear a real story from a survivor first, and then to have also contribution from frontliners and professionals. There is a lot of questions that are raised in my head, I have to say, and I just wanted to respond to Eva in terms of having tailor-need approach. She mentioned reparation, but I think when I am thinking on tailor-need approach, we have to consider, as also all panelists said, that survivors are a heterogeneous group. You cannot apply kind of same intervention because the needs are different. Also, I wanted to bring the perspective of do not harm principles versus trauma-informed approach. When we are discussing for reparative justice, I think it is so important to be always do not harm principles to be embedded in those organizations or individuals who are working with survivors. While trauma-informed approach, I think have to go to each and every one in order to be aware about the impact of trauma to the survivors group in order to know how they have to work with them in terms of sensitivity, ensuring confidentiality, respect, giving the space to them. So in that perspective, I think there is a lot to be done. Then I heard in Ukraine a lot about documentation and over-documentation. I think documentation is so important to establish the truth, to support policies, to support laws, reparation, intervention program. However, each and every time when documentation is done for the survivors, survivors need to be informed clearly about the aim of the documentation. And to our understanding, because we are also working on documentation in conflict-related sexual violence, I have to say that we do not only in certain cases when survivors want to add something more. There is a one time when they are available. We have to prepare them in the process. During the documentation, there have to be a psychologist present there. They have to be completely informed about each and every pieces, what will happen for the documentation. And in our case, we do not share the data with the state. They remind to the organization, I mean, we still do not have a consent from the survivors to go from state level. Because when they go to the state level, it depends for what proposed state use and if the state use with the consent of the survivors, which is another situation, I have to say. Therefore, we promoted, as Kolbasi, my friend, mentioned, administrative reparation. And under the administrative reparation, there is a clause on that format that none of the data which are used for administrative reparation can be used for criminal justice. Why? Because some survivors do not want to go to the justice process. They are overburdened through testifying in different administration in Kosovo, and they just would like to recognize from the state as a survivors and get some support from survivors. So thus, it have to be a constant dialogue with survivors in order to be aware if they want to enter in one process or another process, or if they want to know what's happened with their family or their children, or if they want to go in justice, if they want to receive reparation, if they want just to be advocate, because there are survivors in our organization that they don't want to be part of the rehabilitation program. They want to be just advocate of the survivors. They were in some kind of rehabilitation process. Now they want to be advocate, and they are quite well positioned now internationally in different networks and advocating for survivors' needs. So I think we have always to consider each and every one based on their needs, hiding capacities they have, because some of them might be really so much resourceful, and we need to use those capacities in order to make them active and to make, as we have, for example, we heard two survivor stories, both Kolbati and another.
We will have a chance for many
Yes.
more panels. So
Yes.
this is not the last panel, the last webinar we have on this, by any stretch of the imagination.
But there are a different, Professor Dr. Daniel, there are a different question that they are raised here that need further elaboration in terms of managing expectation, to whom expectation. We work with Kolbasia in a consent forum, for example, with a journalist, because
no, let's leave that for a special.
Next, okay.
We are Farida, please, darling. You are one of the most admirable human being I know. But that's the problem, because you have so much to contribute to every topic.
Yeah, but I just wanted for a whole audience, and I would like to have as much as you, my guest, on October, and I would like to organize a conference, international conference, to reflect on do's and don'ts, as I mentioned.
Exactly.
Because I think most of the time we are speaking what we are doing, what is a good part, how we have to intervene, but we forget to reflect also for don'ts, what it didn't work well. So we have to learn also from a mistake, not only from a good practice. And I really would like to open the floor and invite you in the middle of October somewhere. I'm still raising some funds and look forward to see how we could contribute. Thank you very much.
We love you, and we always gain so much when you just say something, or even you write one sentence. And every time I think of an expert, your name comes up. So we are so honored, and enriched by you joining us and working with us. So before we just say the last word, which is what each one of you will have a chance to say, I wanted to just underline the issue of time, the length of trials, and the length of implementation of decisions are traumatic by themselves. And we have had several events and webinars on this, but let's just remember to answer that. And that's very related to quotes expectation, everybody's expectations, or what's normal for it. But I wanted to also just to point out that when we speak about, when we put together Ukrainians with people, victims of other cultures, many times the victims of other cultures or survivors of other cultures are dual survivors, dual beings, dual citizens, right? It's Chad and UK, it's Syria and France. It's which might be different than survivors of the same country. So let's remember that one too. Again, we can talk more and more and more, and we will. But I would like again for the three of you to part with us with your reflections and recommendations, 2 minutes each, if that's fair. Let's start from the last one to now. How about Olena, please?
There was a question in the chat. The individual was
There's another
asking
question
whether I
in the
can.
chat. Which one? Go on. Which one? Go ahead, attend to it. If it's in Ukrainian, I couldn't read it. So please, go ahead.
Yes, sure. There was a question whether there are Russian institutions with which it is possible to work in the area of dialogues and also addressing the issue of the reparative justice. And I answered that unfortunately, with more than dozens of organizations which personally applied to me or the members of my team, unfortunately, we were not able to develop a professional dialogue. It is very difficult for them to take a professional position. They were very full of energy. They did a lot of things, but the issues which they were raising and things they were describing, they are doing, evoke a lot of questions in me. They could document in the same promises the perpetrator and the victim, not the perpetrator who actually affected this particular victim, but whatever. But I would like to emphasize that we have to move to be able to use all the possible resources available to achieve justice. And I believe that if you have uh, developed a possibility to cooperate with organization, even the Russian Federation organization, if it is possible to maintain a dialogue with them, it is necessary to do that. But I don't think that it is possible to work in the area of dialogue of the peacemaking, to collect people in the same, so to say, circle and to sort of make peace between each other. But I think that at present it is impossible. And as a psychotherapist, I am very carefully treating the resources, which Dr. Daniele mentioned. We are really valuing all whatever resources which we have, and we have to take efforts to restore ourselves. Even we do not like it, we have to adhere to the standards of the cooperation. Even if we are talking about the Russian Federation organization, they have to comply with all the norms of international law, and they have no right to violate any of them. Thank you.
Thank you. And what would be your last word for today's panel?
I am valuing this opportunity of cooperating, of meeting each other, thinking together, reasoning together. And I'm inspired by your further plans to write the articles, to actually analyze the situation. And I'm very sorry that my colleagues and myself not always have time to do that because we are spending most of our time to provide services to the victims. And nevertheless, we are taking care of the future. So I would like to thank you very much for this meeting. And it was a very interesting, and I was very happy to meet Kalbasia. I heard a lot about you, and I now had the opportunity to listen to your report. And also, Mr. Mazen, I was always enjoying your presentation, and I have picked up a lot of very useful ideas from it. Thank you.
Indeed. Kolbasia, please.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Elena. I think your phrases look familiar to me. I don't know where we met, but thank you. Thank you very much. And I also thank you, honestly, for organizing, this event and bringing the diversity of expertise here. I think, we have learned, so much about, the thing that we are, struggling with, to pinpoint what is survivors and what is survivor need and all those and what is justice and all those kind of things is really important. I think my parting, word would be, I think that although we still not kind of understanding clearly yet the survivors in this and that, but we need to consider survivors as the important key stakeholders in all the effort that we try to achieve. And when we do that, it will be much easier for us kind of to understand certain questions that we're asking, which, survivor will be best placed in order to help us do that. But then to do that, we need to do it in a safe way that survivors can be safe and do no harm. And, trauma focus and whatever that the word is, just the word is gone out of, out of
Trauma
my head.
informed, but it
Yes.
doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Trauma informed. And always, when we're thinking about justice, let's think about what is the survivor's need or what is the survivor want in terms of the justice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's precisely the definition of reparative justice. God bless you.
Thank you.
Mazen, please.
Thank you, Daniela. It's not easy to add after Olina and Calvasia what they said, but let me say that victim, they are not a laboratory rat. So they are human. They are the victim. Sometimes in our work, maybe as a journalist or even a lawyer or people who working in jurisdiction, we forget why we do it. We do this for the victim, to support the victim, not to use the victim for our goals. So we need always to remind ourselves that why we do this work. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much. Veronica, the floor is yours. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm so, what can I say? We can't really say goodbye. We have just opened another page that we have to write about, learn from, teach about, and putting it together. So we keep learning. A big hug from New York to at least for a big hug to all of you. And I hope to see you soon, not too far from now. Thank you, thank you.
No, thank you, thank you. Thank you for moderating that conversation. Absolutely. Legend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kolbasha. Thank you, Elena, Mazen, Veronica, and all of you who stayed with us this whole time.
Thank you. Right.